Let's take a look inside of KSHMR Reverb. For starters, let's take a look at this top panel, and yeah, it's most of the same things you find in any reverb, but there is one special thing you can do with the mix knob in KSHMR Reverb, and that is to toggle its mode. So you can actually switch it from mix to just controlling the reverb volume. And when you do that, the dry signal stays at 100% volume, and this is the same as if you had just sent your reverb to a return signal. Now moving on, let's take a look at the middle panel where we've got our ducking threshold and our gate threshold. You might have noticed when we play sound, we get a waveform that appears here. That is the volume of your audio, and as we change the threshold, this is going to influence the effects below. So the ducking effects look at the ducking threshold when deciding when to activate, and the gate threshold is used by the gate to know when it should activate. So that's why you use these knobs here in the middle. Over here, you've got the EQ. This is how you shape the tone of your reverb. If you want to roll off some of the low end or some of the high end, that's where you could do that. Now, what is the biggest difference of KSHMR Reverb? It is the effects here on the bottom. These 7 effects are techniques that I've learned over the years, which can take a lot of time to implement, and we've put them at your fingertips with just 7 simple knobs. We're gonna start all the way at the left is full duck. You guys may be familiar with this feature. It is basically putting a compressor on your reverb that's being sidechained to the main sound. So this piano here has KSHMR Reverb on it, and we've set it to full duck. And what that means is whenever the piano plays, the reverb goes down in volume. You can see that it's getting out of the way when the piano plays, and it comes back in the gaps between the chords of our piano. You control how much it goes down in volume with this knob, and then the release knob controls how quickly it fades back up to the normal reverb volume. Now next is fade-in ducking. Fade-in ducking is similar to the full duck, except instead of using the full volume, we're only going to take a look at the transient of the piano. So every time you hit a new note or a new chord on the piano, we say, hey, that's a transient, and we duck just at the initial strike, but we fade back in as the piano sustains. So compared to full ducking, this is a little bit more natural, and it'll be less jarring to the listener. Now the next one we're going to take a look at is the reverse. This one is really cool. Maybe some of you guys have set up a reverse reverb where you print the reverb, or maybe you draw volume automation slopes in between your notes to create the swelling effect. Well, in KSHMR Reverb, it is built in. The way that we do it is we detect a transient every time you're hitting a new chord or a new note, and we create this volume slope. It's an upward slope that rises until the next note is hit, and it creates a swelling effect that sounds like this. And this is a really cool way to glue together a chord progression or maybe a synth melody, and in the dead space create this rising slope of a reverb that connects all the different notes. Now the next effect we're going to look at is called Tonal Reset. Now whenever a reverb is long, you're going to have the tones of the last note going into the next note. That's just a natural occurrence. But with Tonal Reset, we detect each transient, so each new note or chord you're hitting, and we reset the reverb. So the tone of the last chord or note is never in the next chord or note. Here's what it sounds like before Tonal Reset is turned on. And here's what it sounds like afterwards. This is especially noticeable if we solo the reverb. Here it is before, and here it is after. So the big blurriness of tones is done away with when you add Tonal Reset. The next thing that we're going to look at is the soft transient effect. The soft transient effect is especially useful with synths, instruments that have a very plucky sound to them. That initial transient, that pluck, creates an atonal crashing sound. Let's just listen to the reverb. And as we turn soft transient on, we're taking the signal going into the reverb and getting rid of the transient. And now we get a really tonal reverb. So here it is before, and then after. The next one that we're going to look at is gated reverb. So gating your reverb is a really classic effect you'll find oftentimes with snares where you want a really big reverb on the snare. You want it to sound big, but you don't want that reverb to decay too long and muddy up your mix. So that's what the gate is for. So it's going to silence your reverb when it falls below this gate threshold, which we set here. And we can add a little release to make it sound more natural. As opposed to before, it sounded like this. And as you can imagine, with a decay that long, it is going to bleed into the rest of your track and create problems. So with gate, you can clean it up while still having a big reverb on your snare. The last one that we're going to look at is the octave adder. Here in the bottom right, you'll find the octave control, and you can do a +1 or -1. What this does is it duplicates your sound, and it adds an octave, pitched up 12 semitones or down 12 semitones to add all these frequencies that you wouldn't get naturally in the instrument. So here's our cello. And we can almost make it sound like it's being accompanied by a violin when we add a higher octave. Or we could do the low octave. And we're taking advantage of the fact that reverb blurs the sound. So the artifacts that you might hear when you're pitching something up or down 12 semitones are gone. They're smeared by the fact that it's 100% reverb being applied to them. So guys, those are the 7 effects that make KSHMR Reverb super unique. They're techniques I've learned over the years, and now I'm giving them to you. I hope you enjoy.
Let's begin.